Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live Signing. I'm Danny Valdez, and with us today, again, is American author and philanthropist James Patterson and U.S. Army First Sergeant Matt Eversmann. And they are here for the live signing of their new book, Walk in My Combat Boots. In this book, they have interviewed hundreds of men and women who have fought overseas, and they give us an eye-opening look into what serving our country really looks like. James and Matt, welcome. So grateful to do this again, and how are you today?
We're good, I think. I don't know. Yeah, here's the book. I have it right here. Walk in my combat boots.
Yeah. And, I ordered a copy, but it's not sending. They're not mailing out until today. So unfortunately,
okay,
mine hasn't.
all right. Well, we had a couple of copies that came early. So
yeah. And
this
now,
is, I mean, weirdly, I think that this is the most important book I've ever done. I mean, obviously I do Alex Cross and all that, but President Clinton, who I'm friendly with, and whether you're Democrat or Republican, it's kind of irrelevant in terms of this. But when he was president, he visited more Army bases than any president since FDR. And he's a Southerner, so he knows about the military. And I gave him the book, not for a quote, but he actually gave us a quote. And he said that he was blown away for 3 days. It took him 3 days to kind of get the book affected him so much. Wow. And he said, and he wasn't trying to oversell it, but he said every American should read this book.
Wow.
Because, and Matt will talk about this, and we have Admiral McRaven tonight in an interview. He did Make My Bed, something like that. Is that the right title, Matt? Do you remember? Big bestseller, but he's a very good writer. And Admiral McRaven and Matt both know that an awful lot of people do not understand the military. They don't get it. They just don't understand it. And if you read this book, you will understand it probably for the first time in your life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And set the scene. We're in your office, and Matt, where are we? Is this your home as well?
Yeah, this is our home in West Palm Beach, and it's just a delightful day with no snow, thankfully, which we love.
Yeah, I love that. So for the next hour, James and Matt are going to be signing books and answering your questions. For those who are watching and you've not yet purchased a book, you actually still have time to order an autographed copy and submit a question to James and Matt. Just click over to premiercollectibles.com/walk to order your copy. This is a really unique interview for me personally. This is someone with me on the other side of the Zoom who, in my opinion, as far as I'm concerned, is a real battle hero. I love Marvel movies. I love all of the cool portrayals and reenactments and all that. But with us today is somebody who was there and was a part of what's now a very famous battle. And Matt, you actually experienced what was portrayed in the movie Black Hawk Down. That is about you. They portray you as the main character. And from your perspective, how accurate was that movie in depicting what you experienced during that mission?
Yeah, so jump into the surreal world here, of my life. And I say that not to be cavalier. The movie is very well done. I've told people a million times that it is so authentic as you watch the movie. You get to see and feel the frenetic pace of urban combat, and wow. The actual actors act like real Rangers and the Delta guys, and they change magazines. I mean, it's about as realistic a depiction of urban combat as you could possibly get. Now, I gotta say that while it's so flattering and to fall into this position where some teenage heartthrob is playing you as the main character, that really is fiction, because as anyone, like as you read in these stories, anybody would tell you this is a team, and Task Force Rangers, 150 guys, and 149 of them should have been the character. So I take it with the spirit it's intended, but I will say it's a good movie, and it opens our eyes to what happens on the battlefield.
Yeah, Matt and I, when we sat down to do the book, we had a dual mission. One was, if you've been in the military, if you've been in combat, you will say that Sergeant Eversmann and Patterson got it right. This is the way it is. This is the real deal. This is the truth. It's very readable because I kind of made sure it had the pace of one of my novels, but this is the real stuff. And if you think you know what the military is, you have some vague idea, you've watched a movie or two, you will read this and go, I had no idea. Now I really get it. Now I understand it. Now I understand what it means to serve. And I understand what it means to put your life on the line for somebody else. And, people are always saying, and I'm sure Matt hears this a bit, thank you for your service. People will read this book and they will know what they're thanking people for.
Wow. Yeah. And as you interviewed, now in this book, you guys have interviewed hundreds of people. Is that right? People who are in actual battles.
Yeah.
Did you find a common thread between all of them? Anything that stuck out as like, wow, they all say this, or they all felt that?
I think they're all different, and that's what makes it interesting. But Matt, you can,
Yeah, and again, just piggybacking on what Jim is saying, they are so vastly different. I mean, we cover the whole spectrum from A to Z, but there's some DNA in there that is probably throughout time for soldiers has been there. Selfless service and the courage and the duty. You read these stories of wounded kids, and I say that with affection about kids because they are our sons and daughters that, losing a limb literally and asking in earnest, when can I go back to the battlefield? Like that, that comes up. These are, you couldn't, Jim and I have talked about this a million times. You couldn't make this up. Like it reads like fiction, but you can't make it up. I defy you to. It's amazing. But that would be my, the core of it though, is those great values that soldiers have.
One of the things that I think is useful, my father was in World War II. He would never talk about it. One of my very best friends from high school was a sergeant in Vietnam. He would never talk about it when he came back. One of my other really good friends in business was a captain in Vietnam. He had 2 or 3 funny stories, but he would never really talk about it. Matt did a little movie with a friend of ours on Afghanistan, a documentary, and I was involved in a very minor way. But I was looking at the footage and I was watching the way Matt interviewed soldiers, and I said, "There's no screen there. He knows they're right. They're comfortable with him. Yeah. They trust him." He can get these stories out of them that they won't tell their families. Yeah. And that's what's amazing about this book. This book, for people where your dad or your mom or your daughter or your, whatever, your husband, your wife have been there and they won't talk about it much. Here it is. You're going to understand what they've gone through. And for a lot of people who are out there, vets, and have gone through it and have trouble talking about it. Yeah. They will also, I think, and Matt agrees, find this very, very reassuring and comforting. And they go, yeah, okay, people are talking about it. And this is, I actually want my family to read it because maybe I can't tell them, but this will tell them. This will tell them for me.
Oh, wow. That's really special. And, I've heard from a lot of businessmen, business people, they have shared sometimes regret over missing out on certain family events or important things. But then I've interviewed multiple, in this particular case, soldiers from World War II, and they missed the birth of children and extremely important events, sometimes for years at a time. But 100% of the people that I interviewed that were in World War II said that they would go again today. They said that none of them have regret, and they all said they do it again. And I, as a civilian, cannot wrap my head around that. And that's a personal question I brought today: is how can you make sense of that for us? How is it that someone can give so much but yet be willing to get on a plane and do it again?
Matt, you'd be the perfect.
Yeah. So it's the eternal question, and it's a tough one. And you all who are listening, please, give me a little bit of rope here, because this idea of the national mission and this identity we have as soldiers in support of that mission, the esprit de corps, the camaraderie, the sense of purpose, all these pieces fit into this puzzle where, we all that deploy go through these horrific things and experience things that nobody should experience. And yet when we do, and you get through it, everybody that comes back says, I do it again, and the moaning and complaining about all the things never goes away. But I would suggest to everybody, it is that sense of incredible purpose that you have. And you're right, Danny, when you talk about it. I mean, you think we've been at war here for going on 20 years. People have made their entire career since September 11th, 2001 till coming up on 20 years, this September. And we have had young men and women that say graduated from high school in West Palm Beach or in Nashville that have deployed in service to this country. They've spent more time in Baghdad and Kabul as adults than they have in Nashville. And, let that sink in for a little bit. And yet, there they go. So I won't.
But you think about even people listening, and here's that phrase, sense of purpose. But how many people who are listening go through their lives and have a sense of purpose?
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And if you have that and that camaraderie, that's very hard to get in the business world, and it's so strong when you're dealing with things that can be matters of life and death. And that's hard for people to duplicate when they leave the service. It's very hard, almost impossible in some cases.
Now you guys have signed. I not to err from, because I would selfishly hog this entire interview because I think it's so important. Not only this book, but what you guys are sharing right now. But you guys have personally both signed this book. Is that right?
Yeah.
So. Now, are you guys able to sign books here today as well? Did they send you lots of book plates and?
Yeah, we're going to be signing for everybody who, and I hope, once again, I think there are a lot of people out there, if you think a little bit about people in their lives, friends and neighbors and sons and daughters, whatever, who I think will appreciate this. I think this is one of those gifts, and I don't want to push people. But I think it is one of those where you say, people will say, thank you for giving me that, because it really wound up meaning a lot, because this book is so enlightening. It is, early on with the publisher, the lawyer there, woman, when we were getting releases from the people that spoke to us, and the lawyer had to read about 150 pages or so. And she said, I had no interest in soldiers. No interest in the military. She said, I read those pages. She said they were riveting. And she said she wept 3 times just in that part of the book. And you laugh a lot in it too. There's I forget who the hell said it. One of the generals, what did he say? Yeah, up close wars, tapestry of individuals, painfully raw and probably funny and completely human as the soldiers themselves. And that was General McChrystal, an Army general. Wow. And that's true. I mean, it can be very emotional at times. It can be very, it can be funny at times. I mean, some of the stuff, it's just funny. You gotta laugh sometimes when stuff gets tough. That's something I've noticed, in writing books about the police. You interview a lot of police, and there's a dark sense of humor that gets you through the day sometime.
Yeah.
You have to laugh or you're gonna go crazy.
Now, James, how did you come to take this project on, meet Matt, and why now?
As I said, part of it was in looking at the documentary and watching Matt do the interviews, I said, he's getting at something that I've been curious about, which is, what is the military? As I said, my dad wouldn't talk about it. And suddenly these men and women were telling stories that were, I'm sure that they wouldn't tell most people. And I thought that, going back to the Clinton quote about it being a book that every American should read, I felt that. I just felt that if we could tell the story of the military. I mean, how many books or movies or anything do you walk away going like, I get this for the first time?
Yeah, right.
Which is vital. If we can go out there and people can understand what the military is, really get it. And it's not like it's perfect, and but You know, in this day and age, we obviously, a lot of people are questioning the government right now, whether you're on your right or the left.
Right.
It's confusing and hard to deal with. A lot of people question religion, you know, what shouldn't I do, da, 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 da. I think people mostly, you know, lean toward the military, but they would really lean toward the military if they totally understood what's going on out there and what the sacrifices are.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my understanding of the question, why now, is I felt the same way. I consider myself a young person, and people my age and even younger, the stuff I hear about our government and our military and what they're really doing is so, just to be honest, ignorant, you know, and because I have friends who've been overseas, and what I hear from them is completely different. Their motives for going and what's, quote, really going on. And I think a book like this is very important. And especially right now, we're in a huge time of transition politically.
Yeah, there's a quote from Admiral McRaven, which speaks to, I think it's so relevant right now. He wrote it a month ago because when he read the book. And, you know, it's interesting because I know his initial thought before he started to read it was, I'm not sure if I'm going to love this because, you know, I know too much. And when he read it and just gobbled it up. But he said, and I think it's so, you're talking about the relevancy right now. He said, if these challenging times caused you to lose hope, this book will reaffirm your faith in all that is good and honorable about this country. And I think we need that. We all, I think everybody kind of needs that right now. Yeah, let's give us a little bit of, you know, what's good and honorable and what's, you know, what's gotten us to this place, and let's move forward somehow.
Man, I love that. So I want to jump and make sure we get enough time for these questions that have come in from people who have bought the book. And
Sure.
I'd love to circle back and ask a couple personal questions of my own. Are you guys game?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, man. Throw fastballs.
All right. So let's go to Stacy from Massachusetts. And she asked, I have so many of your books. They're amazing. You are an outstanding author. My favorite. And I could ask so many.
Stacy is my cousin, but you know, so what? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Your well-paid cousin.
Yeah.
I could ask so many questions, but I would really like to know if you are writing any more for the private series.
Yeah. There'll be a private. You know, we have Alice Cross and Women's Murder Club, and private is another one of the series. Yeah, we'll do a little bit more of that series too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Jolene from Pennsylvania. Writing this book must have been quite a journey. What is one thing you learned that you found most surprising or most humbling that you would like your readers to know? And I think I would even put that over to Matt as well.
Yeah, let's do that with Matt for sure. Because he has so much experience, and yet.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. That is it's a great question about this, because I did, not to be arrogant, but I thought I knew a little bit about soldiering, you know, 20 years in this gun club and a couple of the deployments. But, you know, what I learned was just how, you know, hard these young men and women, and I'm talking young, these are 1920, the lower enlisted. This isn't the generals talking about grand strategy,
right?
You know, commanders. This is like this is literally the troops on the ground. And when you talk to a truck driver, literally some young female from, you know, Paducah that spent, you know, hundreds of thousands of kilometers practically, you know, in a 15-month deployment, dodging IEDs, scared out of the, you know, her wits, and yet every day going out, literally leading that charge. You know, this wasn't Super Delta operator doing stuff. This is just this young female that says, you know, Matt, why do you even want to hear my story? I'm like, because you've seen and you've experienced more of the Middle East than most all of us combined.
Yeah. And you know, the stories thing,
that was cool.
The stories thing is another, we haven't talked much about it, but, you know, like Matt mentioned women, there's a story of one woman in here where she had to go through 4 or 5 different schools, first in her class, because they didn't think she could be a door gunner on a copter. And she just kept winning. And then she wound up as a door gunner. There's another reservist who came in, a dentist, and he wound up being a dentist for Saddam Hussein because he had some bad, and he spent some time with them, and Hussein said, "Look, I just kind of made up the weapons of mass destruction." There was an Army nurse who she had to fly back to the States with some soldiers who were dying, and she had to bring them back so that they could spend a little bit of time, the time they had left, with their families. So she's on this plane back, 20 hours back, or whatever it was, quite a long time. Yeah. And also on the plane was a woman who'd gone over there to see her wounded husband, and he died when she was over there. So this woman was coming back with the casket. It's just story after story. The twins, the Drati twins, who were both there together, but in separate units. And all they could think about, they'd go through a firefighter, a really rough night, and go, what happened to my twin? How's my twin? Wow. You know how twins have that thing, sure. Like, yeah. And it's just, I mean, as Matt said, I think there are 80 some stories in here. Every one could be a book. They're 5 and 6 pages, wow. But they just capture that person's story. You get a feeling for that story, for that person right away, and they're kind of their 1 or 2 best stories. Oh. So it's an intense book.
Yeah. Charles asked James, "Did you serve? What prompted you to write this book?" And he says, "This is for my son, active duty, 2 tours in Iraq, and almost 19 years service." That's amazing.
Yeah, I was in college during Vietnam, and actually when I was coming out, it was the lottery, and I just happened to get a high number. But I remember the night of the lottery. It was on television actually, and they would sit there, January 1st, they'd spin the thing, 303. That was the number, and I was in a bar with a bunch of young guys, mostly guys. And everybody had the thing of, am I going to get a low number and maybe get called? And I got a big number, 265. So no, I didn't have to go to Vietnam, which at the time, I don't think a lot of people wanted. It was toward the end of Vietnam, and I don't think a lot of people wanted to go over there at that point.
I bet. Luke from Minnesota, what keeps giving you inspiration to write new and exciting books?
I just see something. I mean, as I said, seeing Matt doing these interviews, I just went, man, this guy, these people are telling stories of the sort that people would love to hear, and they're not hearing them. One of the reasons, as I said right in the beginning, one of the reasons that people don't understand the military is that a lot of people come back and they won't tell them. They won't tell them what's going on. They won't talk about it, or they either won't or can't. Sometimes they don't exactly know how to talk about it. And the beauty of this thing is, for each one of these soldiers, we had, not just soldiers, but military people, we had 40 or 50 pages of an interview, and then to boil that down into 5 to 7 pages. Sometimes we concentrate more on sort of why they chose to go in, sometimes on things that happened during combat or, as they were deployed, and sometimes the big story was after they came back.
Yeah. This next one's for both you guys. Mariah from Washington, can you think of which interview affected you the most and why?
Matt?
Wow, that's I keep saying that's a great question because it really is. They're all.
He learned that from the politicians. They all do that now. Exactly. They'll sit there and say, "Oh, that's a great question, you bastard."
Yes, like, how do you like to go to get choked out? No, Jim alluded to it. I would have to say, and if any of those that I interviewed are listening, please know, and I say that I loved all of the stories. Lisa Bodenberg's story. There's the young female that decided she wanted to go do the hardest thing there was to do in the Marine Corps, and that was to be a door gunner. And in history, there had only been one prior to, and as Jim told that story, but when you hear that, and I also had the luxury with all of them, but particularly with Lisa, to hear sort of the rest of her story, which didn't get it into the book, and the highs and the lows. And my gosh, you like, where do we get such women that have such a strong sense of purpose? And that would have been one. There were literally tears Every time I listen to it, every time I've read it, that stands out as one that I've shown my daughter. I have a 17-year-old daughter who's going to be a college freshman. I'm like, Molly, you know, when you're feeling like it's getting overwhelming, read Lisa Bodenberg's story, because it's that compelling.
There's so much in the book, and just in terms of the way these people describe their experiences. You know, for example, actually turns out to be a tragic story, but this one Marine corporal, he says, I can hear the birds chirping. The sky is so blue and the sun feels great. It's so weird and perverse having these thoughts, because the exact opposite is happening around me. In this helicopter, I wind up flatlining for 2 minutes. I'm not a religious person. I don't experience the great white light, but I do feel absolute peace, like I'm one with the universe. It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time. And, you know, boom. I mean, there's somebody telling what it's like when they think they're about to die. And the book is just full of things. And some of them are very humorous, but it puts you right there. When I write one of my novels, Alice Cross or whatever, when I'm rewriting, I will put at the top of chapters, be there, reminding myself to try to be in that scene so that the reader will feel what I'm feeling. And this book is just full of these be there moments. You're there, and I think that's why, that's what changes people. If you could imagine, you know, talking to 80 military people over the course of a few hours, and you're going like, wow, I just woke up. I get it. I get it. In talking to these people, I get it.
Matt, do you think experiences like you had and like so many people had that will never hear their story, do you feel like it's similar to a near-death experience? Do you have to grip, what do you deal with, you know, internally, and how does that change you when you come back from something like that?
You know, I think everybody has a different answer to that specifically. You know, I have told people, listen, you know, it's like going through a 12-step program, as I've read. You know, this is sort of the stages that you'll go through in your feelings and all that. You know, I've met so many people that have, you know, from the World War II through Vietnam to, you know, multiple deployments of special operators that are perfectly, you know, you wouldn't think that there was a hint of anything wrong. And then some person that just had what one might argue as a very small experience, comparatively speaking, that's profoundly impacted. You know, how do you balance those two? I personally would, for instance, tell you, I never felt that it was necessarily like, oh my gosh, my life is going to flash before my eyes. It's just like, I hope it doesn't hurt. Like literally, like this looks like curtains. I hope it doesn't hurt. But then when you get through that, you just, you know, at this next moment of time, you move on to the next, whatever is focused on your attention. You get through it at the end. I would tell you faith, family, and friends. That's my personal opinion. I don't know what the next guy or gal would say, but, you know, combat's it's a rascally rabbit. You know, there are people that the adrenaline brings them back for more. The purpose brings them back for more. The camaraderie brings them back for more. Man, there's a ton of. You put a quarter in me on this subject, and I'll keep talking all day long. But I think everybody's a little bit different. Some probably do have that legitimate. You know, it is the life is passing in front of my eyes, and I never want to go through that again.
Yeah. Well, if I have my way, we will talk all day long. What was the spirit of your team over there during the you know, the famous Black Hawk Down mission? Did you feel like your training prepared you for that day, or can no amount of training prepare you for something like that?
You know, a little bit of both, but the short answer is the train right in the middle of that. Two quick stories. Right in the middle of that fight, I remember, and literally, when people say this, you should just say, "Hey, Matt, shut up." But in this case, it's really true. You know, in the middle of a firefight, and there are bullets going around, and I remember watching the men, you know, on those street corners, and I thought, "Wow, this is exactly what we did in training." You know, a year ago, like literally it was like this light bulb moment. I can't believe that I'm actually seeing, what we did before actually play out in real life? Because that's the answer to the question is, what am I going to do when people shoot at me? And you do what you've been trained. Like, that was it. To answer your first question, though, this, you can take at it what you want. We got to Mogadishu in August of 1993, and were promptly met by mortar fire from the Somali militia, the loyalists to Mohammed Adid. And picture, we're sleeping in this great big aluminum framed hangar, which is not particularly a great, protector from, things that go boom in the middle of the night. And I clearly had never been in a mortar attack before. And the first time it goes off and it explodes, and you're like, holy smokes, man, that, bad things happen on the receiving end of that. And then the next one would come in and everybody started cheering. Like, legitimately, all these knuckleheads are cheering. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not nearly as brave as all of these people, but I'm going to fake it for a little bit, which I say with a little bit of sheepishness. But I realize, like, these are guys that are like, I'm focused. I am so focused on this thing. And yeah, deployments suck, but we're doing it together, and the shared hardship thing. But I'll never forget these guys cheering when the mortars would land. Like, man, where do we get such men and women today?
Wow. And what sort of lessons from battle have informed your life, in what you're doing right now, and could that you could serve as takeaways even for the rest of us that, who aren't going to be overseas with a rifle, but we are facing our own micro battles, if you will.
Absolutely. And I will bolt right onto that. This, sometimes we think that any of us have kind of cornered the market on bad luck or drama, if you will. But, all of these events that I think we carry in our, kind of emotional backpack, they're really important to each of us individually right now. So whether you're, man, how do I deal with the bad day when I'm getting shot at on the battlefield, or how do I do a bad day on the stock market, or a bad day when my kids get bad grades, whatever it is, it's important to you, and you are the only one that matters about. And so from that perspective, I would tell you, my lesson from the battlefield is, you've got to put that one foot in front of the other. You got to remember your mission. You got to stop, take a drink some water if you need to, rest for a second, but you got to remember your mission. And you got to remember that whatever you're going through, certainly there's somebody going through worse, but by the same token, you're not doing anything different than anybody else has. So don't feel bad that fill in the blank is happening. Now you focus on it, again, catch your breath and drive on. And remember, man, the worst case scenario is the worst case scenario, but that ain't happened yet. So you've got to stay focused. I mean, there's a million cliches about it. But I think sometimes I forget that, man, that was one time I was in Baghdad, or one time I was in Kandahar, or one time this, and you realize, well, I'm not there anymore. I'm in West Palm Beach, and the traffic,
Sure.
The traffic that's going on I-95 today, well, it's certainly designed to frustrate Matt Eversmann. It really ain't that big a deal. It's really just not that big a deal.
So perspective is a huge takeaway.
Yeah, you gotta have, you do have to have some perspective.
And did you, in the movie Black Hawk Down, we see the main character is rappelling on rope down into what looks like hell. Is that what you did? Did you, in that scene, did you rappel down on rope? Was that your job?
We did. We did. And the method of insertion is called fast roping. And it's literally a big nylon rope. It's about 2 inches of diameter that's attached to the helicopter. And you put on thick gloves and you slide down like a fireman. And the reason you do that is because in the city, you can't always land these big, large Black Hawk helicopters. It's 3-dimensional. So you come to a hover, throw the ropes, and off you go. And that part of Mogadishu was particularly nasty, and it was an ugly place. And but that was the way you got to work in the morning, so to speak.
Yeah, that was wow. And so once you, and could you remind us, what was the overall mission about from what were your marching orders? What were you tasked with doing?
Yeah, so the big mission for the task force was to capture or kill this Somali warlord named Mohammed Aidid. On October 3rd, this particular day, our mission was to capture two of his top lieutenants, and potentially even Aidid himself showing up. That's what the intel was telling us. And, when you're chasing after people, you kind of got to go when the people show. In this case, it was during the daylight. My particular job was chalk leader, which basically meant I had about 15 soldiers, and we would insert into the city and set up a loose blocking position on one of the cardinal corners of the target building to keep the bad guys from coming in or the bad guys to go out. So that was it, sort of from big to small, what Matt Eversmann was doing on October 3rd.
Yeah. And after this mission, did you have longer time in the military? And did you retire after this mission?
No, I retired in 2008. So, that was, I spent, it's just so funny about perspective, 3 months in Mogadishu in the early 90s, it seemed like, the deployment that would never end. And then I was in Iraq during the surge from 06 to 07 for, 15 months, which was 440 something days of just, this is literally the deployment that'll never end. So no, I stayed in. I stayed in for 20 years and 3 months, and I'm thankful that I did. And I'm thankful that I'm out now.
Yeah. What was the toughest mission you ever faced? And it can be at home or on the battlefield.
Oh boy,
You better watch it here now. Your wife is listening.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's a really hard one to answer. I don't want to get everybody into a sad mood. I think when you have to deal with death, is certainly nothing ever pleasant about it. And I think when I think about my first experience with that was in Mogadishu on October 3rd, and having one of my soldiers literally die in my lap was something that listen, there hasn't been a day that's gone by since then that I haven't thought about Casey Joyce, but that kind of grows into affection over time. But that's just something that most of us thankfully never deal with. But I would say that's, if I were good, that would probably be it. Dealing, when it's real, legitimately, it's not make believe, it's not the movie. It's like Jim read that passage a little earlier from the Marine, from Rory Hamill. And
we talked about the book dealing with people going in, and then what happens in combat, and then the difficulties coming out of the military for a lot, and there are millions of vets out there, millions and millions of vets, and Matt now deals with some of the problems, because that's what he does in his life right now, dealing with the problems that vets have, or the opportunities and problems, once they get out of the military.
Yeah, I grew up in a little bit rougher part of Memphis, and was as way later on as an adult diagnosed with PTSD, which I actually fought through, overcame, and no longer identify with PTSD. But I know so many people watching potentially could. And did you personally struggle with PTSD, and how did you overcome, and how do you handle it now?
I don't think my answer is I don't think so. But I've read enough to know that there might be that band of probably did. Sure. So, I can't, I'll waffle a little bit. But my stock answer, and I tell everybody, how I think I feel today, which some might argue is sort of a knucklehead in one sense, but on the other hand, I feel pretty good, relatively speaking. But I think I got that way. Again, I think faith, family, and friends are the way to do it.
You deal with a lot of people that do suffer from it, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No, and you do. Listen. If you're listening, don't read in anything that I've said about this. I mean, it's very real. There's no doubt about it, and there's probably I can't get into the clinical stuff, but there is no doubt that there are people who are suffering and need help without a doubt. And if you are one of those people, please go to the VA and get it. I think that there are some people that have been maybe conditioned to think that they're, going down the wrong end, and they're not. Sure. They're not fighting their way out of it, so to speak. But anyway, I just keep saying, the faith, family, friends thing gets you through, and maybe all three at once. Maybe it's one. Who knows in what order? But that's my answer.
James, how do you think these interviews and the stories you heard will inform your future fictional work specifically?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm much more comfortable writing about people with a military background now, because I get it better than I ever did. Yeah. And I had, I'd done a lot of interviewing before, and as I said, I had several friends who have served. So I always will do research. Interestingly, President Clinton and I have a book coming out in the summer, The President's Daughter, and it does involve the military, the whole second half of the book. And we actually brought Matt in to help with the as accurate as we can. And that's something that President Clinton, he really demands that, some of the story that we tell in the book is maybe a little over the top, but it's one of these things where if that happened, here's how it would happen. Here's how it could happen. Yeah. So it's very accurate, and authenticity is a big part of the two books that I've done with President Clinton. And in Walking My Combat Boots, it is authentic. And also, anytime I get involved with nonfiction, I want to do it differently than a lot of people don't like to read nonfiction because there's just more information than they want.
Sure.
Just enough already, and some people love it, but a lot of people, it's like, I don't want all that. So I just did a book on John Lennon, and it's just scene after scene after scene after scene. And Walking My Combat Boots, I mean, it's a little unusual for nonfiction, but it is a page turner.
Yeah, it's a collection of short stories, right?
Yeah, it is. And a lot of, not that they shouldn't, but a lot of women who have read it, they're like, I mean, it's like, wow, I went through it in, a day and a half, or, which is great.
I think this book is extremely important for today. I personally have felt the bewilderment of, going from station to station, social media platform to platform, and wondering what is true, with what I'm hearing, how much of it is true, accurate, where's the context, etc. And I think it's so important that people like yourself do the exhaustive work of meeting with real people, getting real stories, hearing firsthand accounts. That's something that in a world of, frankly, oversaturated media, it's hard to ever have a firsthand account of a thing.
Yeah. And certain people go, oh, well, it's about the military, so it must be kind of Republican. And that's one of the problems. That's one of the mistakes. No, it's not. It is not a political book, but it is accurate and it is true. This is true. This is not, it's not Fox, it's not CNN, it's just the truth. And you can make of it what you want. You read it, and you wish there was more of that, where it's just, here's just the information, here's all the facts.
Right.
We're not trying to make a point. We're not trying to prove anything. Here's what these people went through. You come to your own conclusions. My conclusion is I'm just so incredibly impressed with the military. Once again, not perfect, and not that there aren't problems, and that's unfortunately what happens. All of a sudden there'd be some problem and that gets blown up like it's the end. No, I mean, everything has, the newspaper, the Times, New York Times has problems, put them on the front page. But in general, the camaraderie, the sense of duty, the sense of purpose, all the things that Matt talked about, they're very real. They're very real.
The new way of conveying information is to tell you a little bit about what happened, but then to maximize on what you should think about what happened.
Somebody interpret,
the ancient way was that they told stories. They spent all the time telling you what happened, and they allow you, the thinking, rational person, to come to your conclusions about it, what it means for your life, what it means for today. And as I'm listening to you to answer my questions, the questions of people, I really get that sense that this is going to be a classic. And you know, I've read war books before, and I'm always on the edge of my seat, but never have I read one that James Patterson has put his pen to. So this is something that my book was late today. It's supposed to be here by 10 p.m. My kids have been asking me what's the next book they're going to read. I don't care if they're too young for it. This is the next book they're going to read. I want them to hear. I mean, this is a piece of American history.
Yeah.
And
well, Danny, you said an important thing too, about facts and then editorializing. We do not editorialize at all.
Yeah.
It's not like, and here's our opinion about this man or this woman or whatever. Here's their opinion about themselves. The end. Here's what they went through.
Right.
The end. You make of it what you will, which I think is the way you should write, nonfiction.
Guys, we're screaming close to time. Do you have any closing thoughts about the book, about life? Anything, anything. We're listening, and we want to hear what you got.
Well, Matt, how's your poetry coming?
I'm very introspective when it comes to this kind of stuff. Jim, you know that. And no, I'll just jump in really quick, and I would just tell you, and it's really the reoccurring theme, you know, to put an exclamation on what Jim said earlier. I hope that people will read this so that they get to know in 5 or 6 or 7 pages each one of these men and women that have gone overseas, wherever it was, to do whatever it is they're supposed to do, you know, for us. And I say that to the context that, you know, we're 20 years into this global war on terror, and there are still families and businesses and places that have been completely untouched by 9/11. There are people that have never met a soldier, and it doesn't make them bad, doesn't mean just zig when you should have zagged, who knows, but never have come across a soldier. And yet we all sleep soundly at night, you know, because of these men and women. And I think this is a great opportunity just to get to know them a little bit. So that's my 2 cents on it. That I hope you all will. And as Jim said, you know, share it with your friends because they need to know them too.
Yeah. James, any parting words for us?
No, I think this is good. I think it was a nice thing, and it's great to be with Matt. And you can see the value of co-authoring here because he props me up, and I take credit for his work. Great.
How can people connect with you guys? I just caught that last part. Sorry. That's really the beauty of partnership. How can people connect with you guys? Social media wise, I love Instagram, and of course I already follow. It's at James Patterson Books. Am I right? With an S at the end?
JamesPatterson.com. I mean, yeah, any of that. It'll work. JamesPatterson.com is fine. Yeah.
Okay. And how about you, Matt?
Yeah, I'm an Instagram guy, so at MP Eversmann, you'll find me, and would be happy to answer anything, and you know, always here.
Yeah, well, guys, that's all the time we have. To order James Patterson and Matt Eversmann's limited edition autograph book, go to premiercollectibles.com/walk, and to be a part of the live signing experience with more of your favorite authors, follow Premier Collectibles on Instagram or Facebook. And from all of your friends who've tuned in, guys, from us here at Premier, this has really been important for me personally, and I know for a lot of people watching. Can't wait to dive into this book. And those of you watching, go get it, go order it. You won't be disappointed. Guys, James and Matt, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Danny. Have a great day.
You too. Bye everyone.